What's up? Have you guys ever wondered how they do these epic, cinematic wargaming bases? What's up? So you've come to Emil Nyström and the Age of Squidmar. So today I'm going to show you exactly step by step how I made my Megaboss wargaming base. Today I'm going to show you a lot of new techniques and a lot of new products that you probably never used before while doing basing. Some of them you've seen in my previous video about how I made a forest base, but today we're going to step it up a notch and make something a bit more advanced that you can use for competitions or best in show competitions. So without further ado, let's jump on into it. Okay, so to make a base like this, first off, I 3D printed a base with a hole sunk into it. With my Megaboss, I didn't use my 3D printer, I just used one of the bases that comes from GW. And then I cut the hole open, about half of the base, and used some plastic card from one of these blister packs as the bottom. This one I made 50mm wide and the hole is about 40mm wide, so I'm using a 40mm base to cut the right size for my rock formation. The rock formation will be kind of where I start to work from. I just use one of these cork coasters, one of these you have for like the hot pans from when you cook. I bought it at IKEA for, I don't know, maybe 3-4 euros or something. So I'm just trying to see if it fits. So this step is what gets everything together perfectly. I'm using dried coconut fiber. And the good thing about this is you can find it at IKEA. It's called Odla, and I got the link down below. I'm just using regular super glue to get everything to stick together. It expands really fast, so just be careful when you glue it together. It gets this chemical reaction going. I'm also putting it on the cork wherever the surface is flat, because I don't want it to look like a cork coaster. I want it to look like something natural, like rocks or mud. And this coconut fiber just has this perfect texture to look like a forest ground. So I can strongly recommend you to go out and get some. When making the sewer pipes, I've got these pipes that I got from, like a tube, that I got from buying brushes, Winsor & Newton brushes. So I just drill a hole where the tube fits and measure out wherever I want it to be and how long I want it to be. And then I cut it out. I really want this one to blend in as well. I don't want it to just be like a separate part from everything else. So I'm using the Odla coconut fiber again to put it on the edges so the tube blends together with the rest of the ground. So now I'm just making sure that I have this coconut fiber all the way around the base, so it just looks natural all the way around. I don't want the base, like the flat side of the base, to stick up anything. So for the planks that the orc is standing on, I'm kind of thinking of it as sort of this pier or this bridge going out to the water. You could easily make these yourself using coffee stirrers or ice cream sticks or whatever you have at home that's wooden or XPS foam, and just make it textured. I'm using this mainly because the ease of it and to make this video production go a lot faster. You can check out Black Magic Crafts, I put the link down below. He makes a lot of these wargaming pieces from scratch, so if you want to see how to make like these wooden stuffs, you can check out the link. I'm gluing everything together with super glue, and as previously in the video, I'm using the coconut fiber to make everything seamless in the piece. You're going to see me using this a lot for builds in the future as well. It just makes everything look so natural. same thing goes for the wooden pole as well. This one comes from the same kit as well, from Goblin Town. But if you want to make one yourself, you can use like a sushi stick. Those are perfectly round, and then you just use something to texture them. Jumping from planks back to the tube again, and I'm using white pumice from Vallejo, and this is just to get a sort of a rusted texture to it. You can use pretty much any texture paint that you have at home. You don't need to buy exactly this brand. GW has some, but this is what I had at home. Time for priming. We got all of the textures done, so I'm just priming it black. So the base is dried, and I'm creating my base layers for my wood texture. And I'm using a dark umber. This time it's Rhinox hide, and for the brighter parts I'm using Mournfang brown. To get this style that I have on this miniature, that kind of like old rotten wood, you need to make sure that you have like dark parts mixed up with the brighter parts. And I use the darker parts in the bottom because I'm thinking that's where the water will collect, so that's where the wood will be darkened by the moist. And then I just work adding layers upon layers on the brighter parts and adding textures to that, and kind of keeping the darker parts dark. For the brighter colors, I'm using GW Deathclaw Brown. The brightest of the bright parts I'm using Ushabti Bone. I don't want to dry brush everything because it will make everything look flat and have the same colors to it. So I'm painting every strand of the woods separately. And what I do is usually, as I said, I leave the darker parts dark, and then with the brighter ones I just use layers from the mid-tone to the brightest highlights, and just, you really want some natural variety in your wood. So you can add a lot of different colors to do this. I'm adding a bit of a grayer brown, Sandry Dust and Steel Legion Drab, but you can also add in a lot of greens to it, because moistened wood usually have these algae or other natural green moss or things like that. So don't be afraid to add a lot of different textures, and don't just use dark colors. Use some spot colors that's a bit brighter, because when you look in the nature, everything isn't just flat. You have a span from super dark and matte to really bright and vibrant. When painting the pipe, I'm using Vallejo metal color. You can use pretty much any metal color you have. I'm just starting with the dark one and just adding a bit brighter one to the edges. It's time to create a color for the muddy, dirty green water that comes out of the sewage. And for the base I'm using Waflesh, and then I go up to Deathwhirl Forest and Elysian Green, and I finally mix in Ushabti Bone again with the Elysian Green for the highlights. And I paint all of this while the color is still wet. I never stop. That's one of the good reasons for using a wet palette, because you can have a lot of colors in the works at the same time. So just start with the edges, making them darker, and then I go brighter and brighter towards the middle, because I wanted to have this sort of like a shiny, disgusting effect in the center. For the rust texture, I'm basing it with Mournfang Brown, and then I'm just adding orange highlights to the edges. And you can use pretty much any orange you have at home. For this I was using the Trollslayer Orange. For the rocks I used the same technique as I used in my forest base tutorial, and I just start with slabbing on some colors to get some varied texture, the color texture underneath the gray rock, and then I just use the pale flesh and I dry brush it. As you can see, I'm only using downward strokes when dry brushing the stones, and the reason is because I'm thinking of the light source coming from above, so it's kind of like a cloudy day, and I don't want to have sort of these bright parts where there should be shadows. So that's why I'm only hitting it from above and down. To make the coconut fiber look like real mud or real dirt, I'm using pigments from Vallejo. And once again, these are just the colors that I have at home, so I'm using these. I want some natural variance, so I've got a couple of different ones that I'm mixing when I do this. And as you saw in the beginning of this part, I use some airbrush flow improver to just get it to stick to the base. you can just as well use whatever wash you have at home and then just put the pigments on top of that wash. That way it will bind to the medium in the wash. And this is one of the vital parts to get the woods look like it's been out in the rain and out by the lake for a long time. And this is adding green pigments to it. Because I'm just adding such small amount, I don't need to add any binder to this. I'm just using the regular dry brush and pigments to it. I'm going to add a bunch of flowers and tufts. I've collected these throughout the year and I'm not really sure where all these come from. Some of them are Mini Natur, some of them are Gale Force 9 and GW. I'm starting with the longer ones to sort of get like a feel of where I want them. Just using super glue as always. And around the pole that's holding up the wooden planks, I want to cut up one of these long grass ones, because I wanted to surround the pole. So I'm just putting on these small parts. And this long grass is from Woodland Scenics. And this is another one of these parts that just adds so much to your pieces, and this is roots. And these are actual roots that I picked up from my own garden while I was removing one of the bushes in the yard. And if you don't have bushes that you can remove in your own yard, you can just go out to the woods and find a fallen tree or whatever and just take roots from that, dry it, make sure that it doesn't have any mold or anything, and just glue them on. I'm preparing the base for flocking by using PVA glue, and as with the forest base, I'm just placing it wherever it feels natural to have moss. So I'm making these paths and creating these natural variants that you can see in nature. So we're back to the blister pack again, and this is to create the waterfall that comes out of the pipe, because I want something stable that I can work from. So I'm just cutting it out with a knife and making sure that it fits to the base. So the magic ingredient to not have it look like just a piece of plastic glued on is Vallejo water texture. And as soon as I've glued it on, I'm just dabbing this all over to kind of get this weird texture, and when it dries transparent. And for the pool, I'm using a different product with the same name. It's Vallejo water texture. To color it, I'm using P3 inks. I had 2 drops of green and 1 drop of brown. But you can use just regular acrylic paint as well. Just make sure you don't add too much color, because then it's just gonna look like a colored glossy surface. This product actually shrinks quite a bit, so I actually had to go back 2 times to add more water to it. Now that it's dried, it's time for the last sort of detail to it, and that is the ripple waves that comes from the waterfall falling down. I'm also adding a bit more texture to the waterfall because I want it to really pop on the base. And once these textures are dried, they look transparent as well, as I told you before. So where the water would foam, I'm going back with the dry brush and just dry brushing some white on certain details. And the base is done. I really hope you enjoyed watching this movie. I hope you learned something from it. If you have any questions, feel free to just ask them down below. I'll be happy to answer anything you wonder about, or if there was something you felt like I missed out on showing. I also really appreciate if you have any more ideas on what I can make videos of in the future. One last thing before I leave is hit the subscribe button, because there will be more videos, and I really enjoyed making these, and I hope you enjoy watching them as well. So have a good day. Bye.